Hello everybody, welcome to Facing East. I am Ben. Today we're going to talk about infant communion.
Remember us all when you come in your kingdom.
So when talking about infant communion in the Catholic Church, there's an elephant in the room. So the go-to for most Catholics when they think about infant communion is the Council of Trent. And the fourth canon of the 21st session of Trent states, if one says that communion of the Eucharist is necessary for little children before they have arrived at the years of discretion, let them be anathema. So this means that from a Catholic perspective, you cannot say that the Eucharist is necessary to the salvation of infants and children before the age of reason. It does not say that it's not allowed or that it's bad to commune them. It just says it's not necessary. Other things that aren't necessary, for example, for Catholic salvation is asking for Mary's intercession. So the idea that communion for children is not necessary, meaning we shouldn't do it, is not a good way of looking at it. If you look to the Church Fathers, for example, you have Augustine who said, yes, they're infants, but they are his members. They're infants, but they receive his sacraments. They are infants, but they share in his table in order to have life in themselves. Then we have, from the Constitutions of the Holy Apostles, let the bishop partake, then let the presbyters, the deacons and the subdeacons, and the readers, and the singers, and the ascetics, and then the women and the deaconesses, and the virgins and the widows, and then the children, all the people in the order, with reverence and godly fear, without tumult. And then we go to New Advent. They have an article on infant communion, and they say that the practice of communing infants, the manner of doing so, is the priest dipping his finger in the consecrated chalice and then applying it to the tongue of the child. So in the Byzantine Church, we use the spoon and we put a small amount on the tongue of the child as well. The same idea existed in the Roman Church by the priest dipping his finger and then touching the child's tongue so that the child could receive the Eucharist. This existed in the Latin Church. However, whenever we look to the tradition now in the Roman Church, it has become one where the child should not receive the Eucharist until they've reached the age of reason, which is not what the canon says. That is a innovation, I believe, and it's not a good one. I don't see a purpose for it. So another thing I'd like to point out is the idea that the age of reason is 7 or 8, and children shouldn't receive the Eucharist until the second grade. I find this to be incredibly problematic, and the Council of Trent also finds this to be incredibly problematic. So in the Catechism of the Council of Trent, it says, no one can better determine the age at which the sacred mystery should be given to young children other than their parents and confessor. So the idea that 8-year-olds are when you should first receive communion, or 7-year-olds are when you should first receive communion, doesn't make sense, because Trent itself says that is for the priest and their parents to be able to figure out. There are children, and I'll jump into an example in a second here, that are aware of the Eucharist and will adore it properly at age 3. For example, Dr. Taylor Marshall, a Latin Catholic, says, alas, I wish my children could receive the Eucharist. My 3-year-old and my 5-year-old twins have often expressed their desire to receive Jesus. They already have Eucharistic faith and believe that the Eucharist is Jesus, yet they cannot receive because they aren't old enough. He put that in quotes in the article. So it's this arbitrary limit that we've set, and it completely goes against the letter of Trent. It's this spirit of Trent ideology that the church shouldn't be pushing. I understand where people come from when they say they want children to understand what the Eucharist is before they receive it. I understand where they're coming from. It makes sense to not partake until you are aware of what it is. But what they forget is Jesus said, let the little children come to me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. These are children that, by the letter of Trent, cannot commit sin. These are children who are in a perpetual state of grace until they reach the age of reason, which isn't necessarily 7 or 8, which means that with the current setup of 7 or 8, that we have children that have reached the age of reason, can commit sin, but aren't receiving the Eucharist and aren't confessing their sins, because we've set up arbitrary ages instead of having it be a discernment process for the child, the parents, and the priest. So I'll finish with this. Is it necessary for a child to receive the Eucharist before the age of reason? No. It is not necessary for their salvation. If they are a baptized Christian and they are in a state of grace, which all children before they reach the age of reason are, they will go to heaven. It is not necessary for their salvation. However, I don't believe that there's a reason to deny these children the grace of Jesus and the Holy Spirit through the Eucharist. I believe that it's inappropriate, really, to deny them the Eucharist, to effectively excommunicate them from the sacraments based around necessity and minimalism, because it kind of goes back into minimalism. Well, if it's not necessary for their salvation, why do it? It goes into the same idea as, well, I only need to fast for an hour before communion because that's the minimum the church gives me. Or I only need to not eat meat on Fridays during Lent because that's what the church tells me. It leads to this minimalistic ideology. It's the same concept. And it's something we need to get past. We don't want to strive for the minimum. We want to strive for holiness. Be perfect as the Father in heaven is perfect. All right, everyone, God bless. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, you could thank me by liking, sharing, and subscribing. That's how you're supposed to do outros, right? Yeah, that's how you're supposed to do outros. All right. Thanks, guys.
Rejoice.